Why do some politicians appear to feel no shame? A lecture on criminal psychology, psychiatry, and political psychology. Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like us to explore a question that many people have probably asked themselves while watching the news. Why do some politicians seem completely unaffected by public outrage, harsh criticism, or even the exposure of their own inappropriate behavior? Why do they appear to feel no shame at all? Most people, when confronted with public condemnation, naturally reflect on their actions. They experience shame, guilt, and self-examination. These emotions are essential psychological mechanisms that human beings have developed in order to live cooperatively within society. Yet reality often presents a very different picture. Some individuals become even more defiant as criticism intensifies. Rather than admitting mistakes, they attack their critics, portray themselves as victims, or even convince themselves that they are fighting for justice. Is this simply a sign of a strong personality? Or does it reflect something much deeper within human psychology? In today's lecture, we will examine this phenomenon through the perspectives of criminal psychology, psychiatry, and political psychology. Before we begin, however, I want to make one point absolutely clear. This lecture is not intended to diagnose or label any specific politician or political group with a mental disorder. Mental health diagnosis can only be made through professional clinical evaluation. Our purpose today is educational to understand human behavior by connecting publicly observable behavioral patterns with established psychological research. Part 1. Antisocial personality disorder and the absence of shame. In psychiatry and criminal psychology, when severe conduct problems that begin during adolescence continue into adulthood and meet specific diagnostic criteria, an individual may be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, according to the DSM-5, published by the American Psychiatric Association. Common behavioral characteristics include repeated violations of social norms and laws, persistent lying and deception, impulsivity and poor planning, aggressive or violent behavior, disregard for the safety of oneself and others, chronic irresponsibility, little or no remorse after harming other people. The final characteristic is especially significant. Psychological research suggests that people differ greatly in their capacity to experience shame and guilt. Some individuals appear remarkably unaffected by social condemnation, even when their own actions have caused significant harm. Why this occurs varies greatly from person to person. It cannot be determined simply by observing outward behavior alone. Part 2. Psychopaths and sociopaths. Criminal psychology often distinguishes between psychopathy and sociopathy. A psychopath is generally described as someone whose neurological characteristics may reduce the normal experience of fear and empathy. Some studies suggest differences in brain systems involved in emotional processing, making these individuals less sensitive to the suffering of others. Consequently, feelings such as shame and guilt may be significantly diminished. A sociopath, by contrast, is generally understood as someone whose moral judgment and interpersonal relationships have been profoundly shaped by adverse environmental experiences during development. Unlike psychopaths, sociopaths often recognize that society disapproves of their behavior. However, they continually justify themselves through cognitive distortions and self-rationalization. Typical thought patterns include, everyone is attacking me. I'm the real victim. The problem isn't me, the problem is society. When these distorted beliefs become deeply ingrained, individuals may respond to criticism not with self-reflection, but with increasing confidence and aggression. Throughout this lecture, we will explore why some people appear to operate according to psychological mechanisms that differ dramatically from ordinary experiences of shame. If you stay with us until the end, you'll gain a new psychological perspective on current events and political behavior. If you enjoy this lecture, please subscribe, like the video, and share it with others. Your support allows us to continue producing thoughtful discussions on psychology and political psychology. Political psychology power as an addictive drug and leaders who have lost their sense of shame. Part 1. Maduro, Chavez, Lula, and the psychology of left-wing populism and authoritarianism. Let us now examine what happens when these psychological mechanisms expand from the individual level to an entire nation. This is the domain of political psychology. Consider figures such as Hugo Chavez, Nicolas Maduro, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and other left-wing populist leaders in South America and South Korea. From the perspective of political psychology, observers have argued that some of these leaders exhibit remarkably similar behavioral patterns often associated with antisocial personality traits. Hugo Chavez and his successor Nicolas Maduro presided over Venezuela's transformation from one of the world's richest oil-producing nations into a country suffering severe economic collapse, mass poverty, and one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. Ordinarily, one might expect leaders facing such outcomes to experience profound responsibility, guilt, or shame. Yet critics argue that Maduro projected the opposite image. While many Venezuelans struggled with hunger, he appeared publicly dining at luxury restaurants and enjoying expensive meals. When criticized, he repeatedly attributed the nation's problems to foreign conspiracies, particularly the United States and imperialist forces. From a psychological perspective, critics interpret this as an example of externalizing responsibility while displaying little visible remorse. Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, also became associated with the massive Operation Car Wash Lava Jato corruption investigations, although his convictions were later annulled on procedural grounds, allowing him to return to office. Political psychologists have debated the psychological strategies displayed throughout this period. Critics argue that instead of expressing deep remorse over corruption, allegations involving close political allies, Lula frequently portrayed himself as a victim of an entrenched political and judicial establishment. Part 2. The Dark Triad. Political psychology often explains manipulative and authoritarian leadership through the concept known as the Dark Triad. This framework consists of 3 personality dimensions that, when combined, are thought to create particularly dangerous styles of leadership. 1. Narcissism. Individuals with extreme narcissism possess an inflated sense of self-importance. They believe they are extraordinary, superior, and somehow above ordinary rules and laws. Public criticism is interpreted not as legitimate feedback, but as the ignorant attacks of people incapable of recognizing their greatness. From this perspective, there is little reason to experience shame. 2. Machiavellianism. Machiavellian personalities believe that virtually any method is acceptable if it serves their ultimate objectives. Lies, manipulation, insults, and deception become practical, political tools rather than moral concerns. When embarrassing videos or scandals emerge, the central question becomes not, how should I apologize, but rather, how can I turn this crisis into political advantage? 3. Psychopathy. As discussed earlier, psychopathy is characterized by extremely low levels of empathy, guilt, and shame. Even if government policies produce widespread suffering, individuals with strong psychopathic traits may experience little emotional impact. When these 3 personality characteristics combine, political leaders may appear remarkably confident, regardless of the consequences of their actions. Public attention, even when overwhelmingly negative, becomes simply another opportunity to reinforce their own importance. The ordinary experience of social shame fails to penetrate the psychological defenses created by extreme narcissism. How should we recognize leaders who appear to lack shame? Today we have explored the psychological roots of individuals who seem incapable of experiencing shame, from childhood development to adolescent behavioral disorders, adult criminal behavior, and ultimately political leadership. One important conclusion emerges. Empathy and healthy shame are not weaknesses. They are essential psychological capacities that enable human beings to function within civilized communities. These capacities are largely shaped during childhood and adolescence through parenting, peer relationships, and social learning. When these developmental processes are severely disrupted, or when significant biological vulnerabilities are present, some individuals may develop enduring antisocial traits that allow them to violate the rights of others without experiencing meaningful remorse. Perhaps the greatest danger is confusing boldness with integrity. Many people fall into this psychological trap. When they see a politician who never apologizes, never appears embarrassed, and always projects confidence, some conclude, if they're that confident, they must be telling the truth. There must be a hidden conspiracy against them. Political psychology suggests that this perception can itself become a powerful psychological strategy. By refusing to display shame, some leaders may exploit the public's assumption that innocent people naturally appear confident, while guilty people appear ashamed. For that reason, when evaluating political leaders or anyone in positions of influence, we should look beyond eloquent speeches and confident body language. Instead, we should ask far more important questions. Does this person demonstrate genuine empathy for the suffering of others? Can this person honestly acknowledge mistakes and experience appropriate shame when harm has been done? Those questions reveal far more about character than charisma ever can. Thank you for watching today's lecture. I hope it has provided you with a deeper understanding of human psychology and political behavior. If you found this discussion valuable, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, turn on notifications, and share it with others. Your support makes it possible to continue producing in-depth lectures on psychology and political psychology.